Welcome to Sleepy Time History. Tonight, we journey to a land where ruins whisper of emperors, artists, and revolutions, a land of sun-soaked hillsides, timeless cities, and stories carved in marble and memory. This is the history of Italy, a place where the echoes of ancient Rome still ripple through cobblestone streets, where the Renaissance sparked a blaze of creativity that changed the world, and where generations have risen, fallen, and risen again, leaving behind a mosaic of triumph and transformation. As we softly travel through time, from Italy's distant beginnings to the vibrant life of the present day, may these stories guide you into a peaceful night's rest. Let your thoughts drift gently like gondolas on still Venetian waters, floating through a history filled with wonder. Now, close your eyes, breathe deeply, and let us begin. Long before the great marble temples of Rome or the painted domes of Florence, before emperors, poets, and painters, there was only land. A peninsula shaped like a boot, gently dipping into the heart of the Mediterranean, kissed by waves from the Ligurian Sea in the north to the Ionian Sea in the south. This was Italy, long before it had a name. Our story begins not with cities or civilizations, but with stone tools and silent migrations. The earliest steps. The earliest signs of human presence in Italy reach back some 850,000 years, during the Lower Paleolithic. In the hills of Monte Paggiolo, archaeologists unearthed flint tools, rough, simple, but unmistakably made by human hands. These tools, left behind by Homo erectus, mark the first known footsteps of people in what would one day become Italy. As the Pleistocene epoch unfolded, a time of glaciers and shifting climates, Italy became a kind of refuge. Its central mountains and mild coasts offered shelter during the Ice Ages, when northern Europe lay under thick sheets of ice. Over time, Homo neanderthalensis found his place in the Italian landscape. From the caves of the Apennines to the shores of Liguria, Neanderthals hunted deer, crafted stone implements, and lived in close connection with the land. Then, between 40,000 and 45,000 years ago, something quietly changed. A new kind of human arrived, Homo sapiens, anatomically modern humans, perhaps migrating through the Balkans or arriving by boat across narrow Mediterranean straits. These early Italians painted, carved, and created. In the Puglici cave of Apulia, they left behind red ochre hand stencils and delicate depictions of animals, some of the oldest art in Europe. A landscape of diversity. Italy's geography shaped its human history in gentle but powerful ways. The Alps to the north formed a natural barrier, protecting and isolating. The Apennines, like a spine, stretched the length of the peninsula, separating east from west. And the coastline, long, curved, and scattered with safe harbors, invited trade, travel, and new ideas. Throughout the Mesolithic period, from around 10,000 to 6,000 BCE, Italy's early peoples became more mobile and adaptable. They foraged in oak forests, fished in crystal waters, and developed a rhythm of life tied closely to the seasons. These communities were small and scattered, living in rock shelters and using increasingly refined tools. By the Neolithic period, around 6000 BCE, the Great Transformation had begun. The slow, quiet spread of agriculture, likely introduced from the Near East through seaborne contact or gradual migration, began to reshape Italian life. In southern Italy and Sicily, evidence of early farming, grains like wheat and barley, domesticated animals, and polished stone tools, appears in abundance. The Stentinello culture of eastern Sicily, active around 5000 BCE, built circular huts, decorated pottery with simple geometric designs, and buried their dead with care. These were among the earliest Italian farmers, patient cultivators of the land, crafting a new kind of stability. The rise of settlements. As centuries passed, Neolithic communities grew in size and sophistication. Across the Italian mainland, new cultures emerged: the Villanovan and Remodello, the Funnelbeaker and Godot. They built wooden homes, cleared forests, and established burial traditions. Pottery became more elaborate, with finely incised designs and painted motifs. By the Copper Age, roughly 3500 to 2300 BCE, metal arrived, at first as rare ornaments, later as tools and weapons. Italy's position in the Mediterranean allowed it to become part of a slow but steady exchange of copper, gold, and obsidian. In places like Lake Garda, communities mined and traded, forging new connections with cultures to the east and west. Around this time, a young man died high in the Alps, his body frozen and preserved in a glacier for over 5,000 years. He would become known as Ötzi the Iceman, discovered in 1991, near the Italian-Austrian border. His clothes were stitched from goat and deer hide, his tools included a copper axe, and his tattoos hinted at medical practices. Though his precise identity remains a mystery, Ötzi offers a rare, intimate window into early life in prehistoric Italy. The Bronze Age dawns. By 2200 BCE, Italy had entered the Bronze Age. New technologies spread through trade networks that reached from the Aegean to Iberia. In northern Italy, the Terramare culture built wooden settlements on platforms above marshy ground, perhaps early precursors to the famous floating city of Venice. These communities planned their villages in neat grids, a pattern far ahead of its time, and practiced organized metallurgy. Farther south, the Apennine culture developed a semi-nomadic way of life, raising livestock and moving between summer and winter pastures. Their ceramics grew more refined, often painted with swirling lines and complex forms. In the Aeolian Islands, off the coast of Sicily, traces of Mycenaean contact appear, shards of imported Greek pottery, early echoes of the Mediterranean's coming interconnection. Cultural mosaics before Rome. As the Bronze Age gave way to the Iron Age around 900 BCE, Italy became a mosaic of distinct cultures. The Villanovans flourished in Etruria, modern Tuscany, cremating their dead and burying ashes in urns shaped like huts, a symbolic nod to the homes of the living. Their metalwork was exquisite, and their influence would flow into the more famous Etruscan civilization to come. In the south, Italic tribes like the Samnites and Lucanians lived in hilltop settlements and developed their own languages, art, and traditions. Meanwhile, on the island of Sardinia, the Nuragic civilization constructed mysterious stone towers known as nuraghi, some rising as high as 60 feet. Built without mortar, their purpose remains uncertain. Perhaps they were fortresses, temples, or something else entirely. Over 7,000 of these towers still dot the Sardinian landscape today. The ancient Greeks began to establish colonies in southern Italy around the 8th century BCE, a movement known as Magna Graecia, but that marks the beginning of a new chapter, one of conquests and connections. A land taking shape. By the end of the Iron Age, the land we now call Italy had become a rich tapestry of peoples: Etruscans in the center, Celts pushing into the north, Greek city-states lining the south, and countless Italic tribes occupying the hills and plains in between. They spoke many languages, worshipped many gods, and held many customs. But all were part of the soil, stone, and spirit of Italy, a peninsula on the brink of transformation. A transformation that would come not with the quiet of farming or the clang of bronze, but with the founding of a city, by a river, on 7 hills. As dawn slowly crept across the rolling hills of central Italy, a quiet transformation was unfolding. The age of scattered tribes and modest villages was giving way to something grander, cities of stone, societies of order, and stories that would ripple across millennia. Among the most influential of Italy's ancient civilizations were the Etruscans, the mysterious people of the north. But they were not alone. To the south, Greek settlers brought their temples and philosophies. In the center, the Latin peoples began to emerge. And across the waters, Carthaginian ships sailed with intent. This segment, soft and slow, gently walks you through the world of Italy's early civilizations, the ones that laid the foundation for Rome. The Etruscans, people of the mysterious smile. Long before Rome was Rome, the hills of central Italy were alive with the cities of the Etruscans. Their origins are still debated. Some believe they came from Anatolia. Others say they arose indigenously from the Villanovan culture. But what is certain is that by the 8th century BCE, they had created one of Italy's most advanced societies. The Etruscans built elegant city-states such as Veii, Tarquinia, and Clusium, each surrounded by protective walls and crowned with temples. They were skilled metalworkers, gifted artists, and competent engineers. Their cities had paved streets, underground drainage systems, and monumental tombs, like miniature cities for the dead. Inside these tombs, frescoes painted scenes of banquets, music, and dance. The Etruscans believed in an afterlife filled with joy and company. Their sculptures, too, often wore enigmatic smiles, soft, mysterious, and serene. They worshipped a pantheon of deities, many of whom would later influence the Roman gods. Their rituals included augury, reading omens from the flight of birds, and haruspicy, divining the future by examining the livers of animals. To modern ears, it may sound strange, but to the Etruscans, the universe was a system of signs waiting to be read. Their language remains only partially deciphered, a puzzle of delicate curves carved into stone and bronze. Though much is lost, their legacy would echo powerfully in Rome, in its temples, togas, and even its political traditions. The Greeks in the south, Magna Graecia. While the Etruscans dominated the north and center, southern Italy was blooming with a different culture, Greek. Beginning in the 8th century BCE, Greek settlers established colonies along the coast of Campania, Calabria, Apulia, and especially Sicily. These new cities included Cumae, Naples, Neapolis, Syracuse, and Tarentum. This region came to be known as Magna Graecia, or Greater Greece, and it was rich in philosophy, architecture, and art. Temples rose high above the plains, with massive Doric columns carved from local stone. The Greeks brought their alphabet, which the Etruscans would later adopt and pass on to the Romans. They brought olive trees and grapevines, coinage and theater, democracy and inquiry. Syracuse, founded by settlers from Corinth, became one of the greatest cities in the Greek world. It would later become home to Archimedes, the famed mathematician who once leapt from his bath shouting, "Eureka!" In these southern cities, the air was filled with poetry and debate, with plays recited in open-air amphitheaters and philosophers discussing the stars. Though they lived far from Athens, the Greeks of Magna Graecia carried their culture with care and pride. Italic tribes, the Latins, Samnites, and others. In the lands between Etruria and Magna Graecia lived many Italic tribes, diverse in tongue and custom, but sharing a common Indo-European ancestry. Among them were the Latins, who settled in the area around the Tiber River. The Latin League, a confederation of Latin cities, grew in strength in the centuries before Rome's rise. Among them was a modest settlement on 7 hills, Rome, founded, as legend says, in 753 BCE by Romulus, son of the war god Mars and the Vestal Virgin Rhea Silvia. To the east and south lived the Samnites, fierce hill people of the Apennines. They built oppida, fortified hilltop towns, and were formidable warriors, who would later give the Roman Republic a hard-earned respect in a series of difficult wars. The Sabines, Volsci, and Hernici were other tribes with deep roots in central Italy. They farmed, traded, and sometimes clashed with their neighbors, shaping the volatile but vibrant world that Rome would soon navigate. The Phoenician shadow, Carthage and the Western Sea. Though not native to Italy, the Phoenicians, and later their colony Carthage, played a vital role in Italy's early history. Their ships crossed the Mediterranean like silent arrows, bringing goods, ideas, and ambition. They established trading posts in Sardinia, Sicily, and Corsica, bringing competition and cooperation in equal measure. The city of Carthage, founded in modern-day Tunisia, became a dominant naval power and rival to the Greek and Roman spheres. Carthaginian influence, while more felt in later centuries, set the stage for future conflicts, especially with the growing Roman Republic. Threads coming together. By the 6th century BCE, Italy was a tapestry woven from many threads. The Etruscans ruled with kings and priesthoods. The Greeks built coastal cities filled with light and logic. The Italic tribes maintained traditions both old and fierce. And Rome, once a small Latin outpost, began to watch, learn, and grow. In 509 BCE, the Roman people, weary of Etruscan kings, would overthrow their monarchy and declare a republic. That event, a political and cultural turning point, would mark the end of one chapter and the beginning of another far more famous. But before Rome's voice grew loud, it listened carefully. The roads, religions, alphabets, and arts of Italy's ancient civilizations all became part of the Roman soul. The Etruscans gave Rome its sacred rituals and city planning. The Greeks inspired its art, drama, and philosophy. The Italic tribes forged its military instincts. Together, they created a cultural soil rich enough to grow an empire. As night gently falls over these ancient hills and the lights of forgotten cities flicker in memory, we remember that even Rome, mighty and enduring, had its teachers. And those teachers lived, thrived, and dreamed across the land of Italy, long before empire ever crossed the Tiber. Long before Italy became the beating heart of a vast empire, it was a land of constant movement, a place where peoples came and went, where warriors crossed mountains and seas, and where the very shape of history was carved by swords, treaties, and migrations. This segment explores the waves of conquests and invasions that shaped the Italian peninsula, from the earliest tribal incursions to the powerful arrival of the Celts and the eventual rise of Rome. Though time marched forward with battle cries and ambition, our tale unfolds gently, as if whispered by the winds over the Apennines. In the time before Rome, early movements and shifting borders. In the earliest centuries of recorded memory, the Italian peninsula was not a unified whole, but a patchwork of regions, languages, and rivalries. The first invasions were not great military campaigns, but slow migrations, movements of people seeking fertile land, defensible hills, and fresh water. The Italic tribes, ancestors of the Latins and Samnites, gradually spread into Italy from the north and east, likely during the 2nd millennium BCE. They brought with them new tools, burial customs, and languages, part of the broader Indo-European family. Far to the south, seafaring Greeks came not as conquerors, but as colonists. But their arrival shifted balances of power, pushing inland peoples into conflict over resources and influence. Italy's early landscape was not quiet. It simmered with tension, competition, and cultural exchange. The Etruscans and their ascendancy. Though the Etruscans are remembered more for their art and ceremony, they were also a powerful military force. From their strongholds in northern and central Italy, they expanded southward, sometimes through treaties, sometimes through war. At their peak, the Etruscans controlled much of the Tyrrhenian coast, extending their influence to Campania. Their navy roamed the seas, and their warriors built fortresses on rocky hills. Cities like Veii and Tarquinia became dominant, often rivaling early Rome in size and power. The Etruscans were not just invaders of land, they were shapers of political structure. In time, their kings would even rule Rome itself. But the Etruscan domination was not to last. By the 5th century BCE, internal divisions, pressure from northern tribes, and the growing might of Rome began to unravel their grip. The Celtic storm, invasion from the north. Perhaps the most dramatic of Italy's early invasions came from the north, beyond the Alps, where Celtic tribes, known to the Romans as Gauls, began crossing into the fertile plains of the Po Valley. Beginning around 400 BCE, Celtic groups such as the Senons, Insubres, and Boii swept into northern Italy, driving out earlier peoples and settling in what the Romans would later call Cisalpine Gaul. They were tall, fierce warriors, often adorned with torques of bronze and gold, and skilled in the use of swords and chariots. Their arrival disrupted the existing balance of power. They sacked towns, challenged the Etruscans, and would eventually turn their gaze south, toward Rome. In 390 BCE, the Gauls achieved something no other people had yet done. They captured and sacked Rome. The Roman accounts, told with awe and humiliation, describe how the city was ransacked and how the Romans had to ransom their freedom with gold. Though the Gauls eventually withdrew, their presence in northern Italy remained for centuries. Cities like Mediolanum, modern Milan, were originally Celtic strongholds. The threat from the north would shape Roman military policy for generations. Samnites and the southern struggles. To the southeast, in the rugged hills of the Apennines, lived the Samnites, fierce and independent warriors. Throughout the 4th and 3rd centuries BCE, they clashed repeatedly with the expanding Roman Republic in a series of bitter wars. These Samnite wars were not brief skirmishes, they were extended campaigns marked by mountain ambushes, shifting alliances, and brutal engagements. The Samnites were known for their tenacity and their innovative military tactics, including the use of the manipular formation, which the Romans themselves would later adopt. Although eventually defeated, the Samnites taught Rome valuable lessons in adaptability and resilience. Their resistance was a reminder that the conquest of Italy was far from easy. It was earned through sweat, strategy, and sorrow. Pyrrhus of Epirus, a king and his costly victories. Perhaps the most storied foreign invader of early Italy was King Pyrrhus of Epirus, a relative of Alexander the Great. In 280 BCE, He sailed from Greece to southern Italy to assist the Greek city of Tarentum in resisting Roman expansion. Pyrrhus brought with him a seasoned army, including war elephants, never before seen by the Romans. He won a series of battles at Heraclea and Asculum, but at such a high cost that his name lives on in the phrase, Pyrrhic victory, a win that proves ruinous. Though tactically skilled, Pyrrhus underestimated Rome's capacity for endurance. After several inconclusive years of fighting, he returned to Greece, his Italian adventure undone. His campaign, though ultimately a failure, proved that Rome was no longer just a regional power, it was a rising force to be reckoned with. Carthage looms in the west. While Italy was still divided between tribal alliances and city-states, across the sea, a shadow grew longer. Carthage, the great Phoenician city of North Africa, held sway over Sicily and parts of the Mediterranean. Its fleets patrolled the waters, and its generals eyed the Italian coastlines. Though the full fury of Rome and Carthage would not erupt until the Punic Wars, the tension between these powers was already stirring. Carthaginian merchants traded in Italian ports. Their influence, subtle yet strategic, marked the beginning of a geopolitical rivalry that would define the Mediterranean world. The Roman unification of Italy. As invaders came and went, one force remained, steady, growing, and determined: Rome. Throughout the 4th and 3rd centuries BCE, Rome waged war after war, not just to defend itself, but to expand its territory and influence. The conquest of Etruria, Samnium, Latium, and Cisalpine Gaul was not a single act, but a process, slow, complex, and often brutal. Rome's success was not just military. It came from its ability to absorb conquered peoples, to offer them citizenship, roads, and a place in a larger story. In time, many former enemies would fight for Rome, not against it. By the end of the 3rd century BCE, nearly the entire peninsula was under Roman control. The days of tribal independence and foreign incursions had given way to the rising tide of Roman unity. But conquest never truly ended, it merely changed shape. As Rome emerged victorious in its quest to dominate the Italian peninsula, a new chapter opened, one not of defense, but of ambition. This was the age when Rome transformed from a regional power into a global empire, and Italy became the beating heart of a civilization that would shape the course of world history. In this segment, we drift gently through centuries of expansion, across seas and deserts, over mountains and rivers, as Italy's destiny became entangled with those of Gaul, Egypt, Judea, Britannia, and beyond. It was a time of legions, of emperors, and of ideas born in marble and blood. Let us settle into this chapter quietly, imagining the echo of sandals on cobbled streets, and the hush of the Senate halls where the fate of nations was once whispered. The Punic Wars, testing an empire's resolve. It began with Carthage, the ancient maritime superpower across the Mediterranean. The Punic Wars, a series of 3 brutal conflicts fought between 264 and 146 BCE, were the crucible through which Rome became an empire. The first war was for Sicily, a stepping stone of trade and strategy. The second, more infamous, brought the Carthaginian general Hannibal over the Alps, his war elephants leaving silent footprints in the snow. He ravaged the Italian countryside for over a decade, winning battles but never quite breaking Rome's spirit. Rome, under generals like Scipio Africanus, countered by striking at Carthage itself. By the war's end, Carthage was defeated, and Rome held Sicily, Sardinia, Corsica, and parts of Spain. In the third and final Punic War, Rome destroyed Carthage completely. The city was razed, and its soil, legend says, salted. With Carthage gone, the western Mediterranean belonged to Rome. Italy, from its position in the center of this vast sea, now stood at the helm of an empire in the making, conquering the East, Greece, Egypt, and the Hellenistic world. As Rome turned eastward, it encountered the glittering remnants of Alexander the Great's empire. Greece, Egypt, and the lands of the Near East were no longer united under one king, but divided among feuding dynasties. To the Romans, Greece was both a rival and a teacher. They admired its philosophers, its drama, its architecture. Yet they fought its kings and subdued its cities. In 146 BCE, the same year Carthage fell, so too did Corinth, marking the full Roman domination of Greece. Egypt, though wealthier and more stable, fell not through war but through politics. By the time of Cleopatra, Rome had become deeply entangled in Egyptian affairs. Her alliance and romance with Julius Caesar, and later Mark Antony, became legend. After their defeat by Octavian, the future Augustus, Egypt was absorbed into the Roman Empire in 30 BCE. Rome's grain, gold, and glamour now flowed from the Nile. Italy, once a cluster of modest hill towns, now sat at the center of a Mediterranean world stretching from the Atlantic to the Euphrates. Julius Caesar. Expansion and the end of a republic. At the heart of Rome's expansion was Julius Caesar, a brilliant general whose ambition changed history. Between 58 and 50 BCE, Caesar led his legions in the Gallic Wars, conquering what is now France, Belgium, parts of Germany, and even reaching the shores of Britain. His commentaries on the Gallic War read like both a military report and a literary masterpiece, calm, persuasive, and chillingly efficient. But Caesar's success abroad made him powerful at home, too powerful. Civil war erupted when he crossed the Rubicon River in 49 BCE, marching on Rome itself. He emerged victorious, but the price was high. In 44 BCE, he was assassinated in the theater of Pompey by senators who feared he sought to become a king. His death marked the end of the Roman Republic and the birth of a new order. Italy, as ever, was both the battleground and the prize. The Roman Empire, Augustus, and the Age of Peace. After Caesar's death, his adopted heir Octavian rose to power, defeating rivals like Mark Antony and Cleopatra. In 27 BCE, he became Augustus, the first emperor of Rome. Under Augustus, Rome entered a golden era known as the Pax Romana, 2 centuries of relative peace and stability across the empire. Roads were built, cities flourished, trade expanded, and Roman law spread from the Atlantic coast to the deserts of Arabia. Italy, especially Rome, became the cultural and administrative heart of this vast empire. Marble temples lined the streets. Aqueducts brought water from distant hills. The Colosseum, the Pantheon, and the Forum reflected the grandeur of a people who now ruled the known world. Yet even in this time of peace, expansion did not cease. Beyond the frontiers, the limits of expansion, the empire continued to push outward from Dacia, modern Romania, to Mauritania, in North Africa. Emperors like Trajan conquered Mesopotamia and reached the Persian Gulf. Others attempted to hold Britain, though it remained restless and wild. Still, there were limits. The failure to conquer Germany beyond the Rhine, after the devastating loss at the Battle of the Teutoburg Forest in 9 CE, marked a turning point. The empire had grown vast, but not infinite. Rather than endless conquest, Rome began to focus on consolidation. Fortified frontiers like Hadrian's Wall in Britain and the Limes Germanicus along the Rhine defined the edge of empire. Italy, now surrounded by Roman provinces and protected by a vast military network, enjoyed a centrality it had never known before. The provinces and the Italian identity. As the empire expanded, the lines between Italy and the provinces began to blur. Roman citizenship, once reserved for those born on the peninsula, was gradually extended to people across the empire. In 212 CE, under Emperor Caracalla, citizenship was granted to nearly all free inhabitants of the empire, a recognition that the Roman world was no longer just Italian. But for centuries, Italy retained a special status. Its cities were models of Roman life. Its senators dominated imperial politics. Its lands supplied much of the empire's elite. Even as power shifted to the provinces, to generals on distant frontiers and emperors born in Spain, Africa, or Syria, Italy remained the symbolic and spiritual core of Rome's greatness. Cultural expansion, language, law, and legacy. Rome's empire was not only military, it was cultural. Latin became the language of law, governance, and literature. Roman roads stitched the empire together, allowing ideas, goods, and armies to move swiftly. Roman law became the standard by which justice was measured. Amphitheaters, baths, and forums sprang up in cities from Trier to Tunis, from Londinium to Antioch. Italy, through its empire, exported its identity, not just to colonies but to history itself. Even today, the influence of that expansion can be felt, in languages, in calendars, in legal systems, and in architecture. Let us now drift into a chapter that reveals the cracks beneath marble arches, the tremors that shook emperors and troubled dynasties. For even at the height of Roman glory, Italy was not always a land of calm and control. Beneath the surface of empire, there stirred dissent, defiance, and the indomitable will of those who rose in protest, not just against foreign rule, but sometimes even against their own. This is the quiet telling of Italy's age of resistance. The muffled rustle of revolt, the whispered plots of assassins, and the firelight flicker of those who dared to say no. The Gracchi brothers, reformers or revolutionaries. We begin in the late Roman Republic with two brothers, Tiberius and Gaius Gracchus. They were born into a wealthy family, yet both would die trying to uplift the poor. Tiberius, in 133 BCE, proposed redistributing public land to the landless, a challenge to the elite's vast holdings. Though his intentions were noble, his methods alarmed the Senate. He bypassed traditional procedures, was accused of tyranny, and was ultimately killed by a mob of senators. A decade later, his brother Gaius tried again. He pushed for broader reforms, affordable grain, new colonies for the poor, and citizenship rights for Rome's allies. His vision was grand, but opposition fierce. When tensions escalated in 121 BCE, Gaius was declared an enemy of the state. He died on the Aventine Hill, either by execution or by his own hand. Their deaths marked a turning point. The Republic had shown it would meet reform with violence, a sign of deeper fractures yet to come. Spartacus, the slave who challenged Rome. One of the most iconic acts of resistance in Italian history came not from a senator, but from a slave. Spartacus, a Thracian gladiator, led a massive slave revolt between 73 and 71 BCE. Escaping from a gladiatorial school in Capua, he and his followers took to the countryside, recruiting tens of thousands of slaves, herdsmen, and peasants. For 2 years, they outwitted Roman armies, defeating multiple legions. Their cause, though poorly recorded in Roman sources, was likely a cry for freedom, a desire to escape bondage, and perhaps a dream of returning home. Eventually, the Roman general Crassus crushed the revolt. Spartacus died in battle, and over 6,000 of his followers were crucified along the Appian Way as a brutal warning. Though the rebellion failed, its memory lingers, a testament to the yearning for liberation in the shadow of empire. The Catiline conspiracy, a plot from within. Sometimes, resistance did not come from the oppressed, but from the ambitious. In 63 BCE, a disgraced aristocrat named Lucius Sergius Catilina, or Catiline, launched a conspiracy to seize power in Rome. He promised debt relief to the poor and power to the disenfranchised, gathering support from veterans and the desperate. His plot was discovered by the consul Cicero, who gave a series of dramatic speeches denouncing Catiline before the Senate. The conspirators in Rome were executed without trial, while Catiline died leading rebel forces in a final battle in northern Italy. Though seen as a villain by many ancient writers, some modern historians see in Catiline's movement a reflection of deep social inequalities and the tensions brewing in late Republican Italy. Provincial rebellions and the social war. Italy's allies, the cities and communities that had fought alongside Rome for centuries, also felt the sting of exclusion. Though they paid taxes and sent soldiers, they were denied Roman citizenship. In 91 BCE, this discontent erupted into the social war, from socii, meaning allies. Cities in central and southern Italy, such as Corfinium, declared independence and formed their own rival state, complete with a senate and consuls. The Roman response was fierce, but the war was devastating for both sides. Ultimately, Rome agreed to grant citizenship to all Italian allies who laid down arms. The social war was a pivotal moment. It extended the idea of what it meant to be Roman, and made Italy more politically unified, even as the Republic itself inched toward collapse. Imperial intrigue, assassinations, and civil war. In the imperial era, resistance took more covert forms. Emperors lived in fear of plots, poisonings, and palace coups. Italy became the stage for many such dramas. Caligula, infamous for cruelty and excess, was assassinated in 41 CE by members of the Praetorian Guard, Rome's own elite protectors. His uncle, Claudius, was hurried into power before the Senate could react. Nero, too, would face rebellion. His tyranny provoked uprisings across the empire, and in 68 CE, the governor Galba declared himself emperor. Nero, abandoned and alone, took his own life, the first Roman emperor to do so. The year that followed, known as the Year of the Four Emperors, saw a chaotic struggle for power, with armies clashing even in Italy itself. These were not peasant revolts, but elite contests for control, and yet, they reveal how unstable imperial power could be. Resistance in Italy had shifted from open revolt to intrigue, played out in marbled corridors and shadowed courtyards. Christianity and the Quiet Revolution. One of the most profound forms of resistance in Italy came not from violence, but from faith. The rise of Christianity, from a small Jewish sect to a vast spiritual movement, challenged Roman authority in subtle yet powerful ways. Early Christians in Italy, especially in cities like Rome, Naples, and Pompeii, refused to worship the emperor or the Roman gods. This defiance, though peaceful, was seen as dangerous. Christians were arrested, tortured, and executed, some famously in the Colosseum. Yet their persistence inspired others. Their message of hope, humility, and resurrection quietly undermined the values of conquest and hierarchy. By the early 4th century, under Emperor Constantine, Christianity was legalized. Soon after, it became the empire's official religion. What had begun as a whisper in catacombs and tenements had become a tide that transformed Italy's soul. Barbarian invasions, resistance from without. As the empire aged, its strength waned, and its borders softened. From the 3rd century onward, Italy faced waves of invasions, not so much resistance from within, but from beyond the empire's walls. The Goths, Vandals, Huns, and others swept through the empire, sacking cities and challenging Roman rule. In 410 CE, the Visigoths under Alaric sacked Rome, the first time the Eternal City had fallen to an enemy in over 800 years. The shock was immense. Rome, once the mistress of the world, had been humbled. Later, in 455 CE, the Vandals struck again. And in 476 CE, the Germanic general Odoacer deposed the last Western Roman emperor, Romulus Augustulus, bringing the Western Empire and classical Roman Italy to a formal end. Italy would now be a land of fragmented kingdoms and shifting powers. But through it all, the spirit of resilience, that same spirit that once stirred the Gracchi, Spartacus, and the Christians, remained alive in the hills and cities of the peninsula. As we settle deeper into the folds of Italy's story, we reach a crossroads, a place where the landscape itself seems to pause and shift. Across the long arc of its history, Italy has experienced moments so profound, so utterly transformative, that the course of the nation changed forever. In this chapter, we will gently wander through these turning points, moments of collapse and rebirth, of empire and nation, of art and war. Some emerged in the hush of inspiration, others in the roar of revolution. But all of them left their mark on Italy's soul. The fall of the Western Roman Empire, 476 CE. We begin with a moment both symbolic and seismic, the fall of the Western Roman Empire. In the year 476 CE, the teenage emperor Romulus Augustulus was deposed by the Germanic general Odoacer. There was little fanfare, no grand final battle, just a quiet handover of power from boy to soldier. The Roman Senate, weakened and ceremonial, still lingered, but the empire in the West had collapsed. Italy, once the heart of Roman majesty, was now carved up by Goths, Lombards, and other migrating peoples. For the first time in centuries, there was no single ruler in Rome, no emperor in the West. It was the end of an age, and the beginning of what we now call the Middle Ages. Though Rome had fallen, its memory, its roads, laws, language, would echo through Italian valleys for centuries to come. The rise of the Papal States and the power of the Church. Out of the empire's ruins, a new authority began to rise, not imperial, but spiritual. In the centuries following the fall, the Bishop of Rome, later known as the Pope, grew in influence. By the 8th century, the Church had become not only a religious power but a political one. With the help of the Frankish king Pepin the Short, the Pope was granted territory in central Italy, forming the Papal States. From Rome, the Pope now ruled over land, levied taxes, and commanded armies. The Papal States would endure for over 1,000 years, making the Church one of the most enduring forces in Italian history. In this turning point, Italy became not only the cradle of empire but also the beating heart of Western Christianity. The Renaissance, a rebirth of art and ideas, 14th to 16th centuries. By the 14th century, something extraordinary began to stir in the cities of Italy, a renaissance, or rebirth. In places like Florence, Venice, and Rome, artists, thinkers, and architects reawakened the spirit of antiquity. They studied ancient texts, experimented with perspective and light, and began to view the human being as a subject of beauty and wonder. This was the era of Leonardo da Vinci, Michelangelo, and Raphael, of Brunelleschi's Dome and Botticelli's Venus. It was a time when Italy became the cultural epicenter of Europe, and possibly of the world. The Renaissance did not come from war or conquest. It was a quieter revolution of ideas, innovation, and individualism. It shifted the world's gaze from heavens to humans, from the afterlife to the present, from dogma to discovery. This intellectual flowering would lay the groundwork for modern science, politics, and philosophy. It was a turning point not just for Italy, but for the entire Western world. The sack of Rome, 1527, and the end of the High Renaissance. Yet even golden ages have shadows. In 1527, the city of Rome was brutally sacked by troops loyal to the Holy Roman Emperor Charles V. These soldiers, many unpaid and hungry, unleashed chaos upon the eternal city. Churches were looted, art destroyed, clergy humiliated. The sack of Rome marked the end of the High Renaissance. It was a shocking reminder that no matter how enlightened a society becomes, it is never far from violence. From this point forward, the center of European culture slowly shifted northward, to France, the Netherlands, and beyond. Italy remained influential, but the moment of her cultural dominance had passed. Still, the legacy of the Renaissance would live on, in marble and fresco, in libraries and museums, in memory. The unification of Italy, Risorgimento, 19th century. For centuries, Italy was a patchwork of city-states and kingdoms. Venice, Florence, Naples, Milan, the Papal States, and more. Though united by language and culture, politically Italy remained divided. This changed in the 19th century, during a movement known as the Risorgimento, the Resurgence. It was a time of revolutions, secret societies, and national dreams. Figures like Giuseppe Mazzini, Giuseppe Garibaldi, Count Cavour, and King Victor Emmanuel II worked, each in their own way, to unite the peninsula. In 1861, after years of war and diplomacy, the Kingdom of Italy was declared. By 1870, with the capture of Rome, the unification was complete. For the first time since the Roman Empire, Italy was one country. The Risorgimento was a turning point of identity. Italians began to see themselves not as Venetians or Sicilians, but as Italians. The path was not without struggle, but the dream of unity had finally found its home. World wars and the rise and fall of fascism. In the 20th century, Italy stood again at a global crossroads. During World War I, Italy joined the Allies, hoping to reclaim lands it considered rightfully Italian. Though victorious, the post-war years brought economic hardship, social unrest, and a growing sense of betrayal, known as the mutilated victory. In this climate, a new political force emerged: fascism. In 1922, Benito Mussolini marched on Rome and seized power. His regime promised strength and stability, but delivered dictatorship, censorship, and military aggression. Italy invaded Ethiopia, aligned with Nazi Germany, and entered World War II. By 1943, the tides of war had turned. Mussolini was deposed, and Italy changed sides, fighting with the Allies against Nazi forces. Yet the war's toll was severe. Cities bombed, lives lost, the north occupied by German troops and the south by Allied forces. In 1946, following a referendum, Italy abolished its monarchy and became a republic. The fall of fascism was one of Italy's most dramatic turning points. From it would rise a new democracy, shaped by trauma but hopeful for peace. The economic miracle, 1950s, 60s. In the decades after the war, Italy experienced a period of rapid economic growth and industrialization, often called the Italian economic miracle. Cities modernized, factories multiplied, and highways stretched across the peninsula. Italy became known for design, fashion, automobiles, think Fiat, Vespa, Olivetti. A nation once marked by poverty became a founding member of the European Union and a symbol of post-war recovery. This was not only an economic shift, but a cultural one. Mass migration from southern villages to northern cities reshaped Italian society. The country moved from a mostly rural economy to an urban, industrial one, all within a generation. Yet even amidst progress, regional inequalities persisted. The north-south divide remained, and rural areas often struggled to catch up. Still, the economic miracle gave Italy a new identity: modern, global, forward-looking. In each of these moments, from imperial collapse to republican birth, from Renaissance glory to fascist ruin, Italy has shown a remarkable ability to reinvent itself. Its turning points are not just markers in time, but stories of resilience and rebirth, whispered along the colonnades of Florence, in the shadows of the Colosseum, and across the quiet fields of Emilia-Romagna. Let us now draw closer, not to kings or conquerors, not to monuments or revolutions, but to the heartbeat of the Italian story, its people. For through every turning point and shifting age, it has been the voices of everyday Italians, farmers and fishermen, artists and artisans, mothers and migrants, who have carried the spirit of this land forward, whispering its truth through time. Tonight, we pause and listen to those voices. Not loud, not boastful, but steadfast, tender, and true. Echoes from the fields, the rural heart of Italy. For much of its history, Italy has been a country of the land, its rhythms set not by clocks, but by the sun, the harvest, the seasons. In the northern valleys of Lombardy and Piedmont, peasants once tended rice paddies and vineyards. In the central hills of Tuscany and Umbria, they raised olive trees and sheep. And in the sun-baked south, in Sicily, Calabria, and Campania, life was shaped by citrus groves, wheat fields, and the ancient struggle against drought and poverty. Generations of contadini, tenant farmers, worked the land not for wealth, but for survival. They sang lullabies beneath grape arbors, whispered prayers to the Madonna for rain, and passed down stories of feast and famine, war and endurance. Their voices, though rarely recorded in books, echo in the recipes, rituals, and dialects of every region, each one a note in Italy's living symphony. The artisans, crafting beauty from clay, stone, and thread. Italy's glory is often measured in its masterpieces, its paintings and cathedrals, statues and mosaics. But behind every work of genius stood hands that built, stitched, and shaped. In the back streets of Florence, leatherworkers stained hides by candlelight. In Murano, glassblowers exhaled fragile beauty into glowing forms. In the winding alleys of Naples, tailors, goldsmiths, and cobblers practiced skills passed down from father to son, mother to daughter. Whether painting porcelain in Capodimonte, carving violins in Cremona, or weaving lace in Burano, these artisans didn't just make objects, they made identity. Even today, in small workshops tucked away in medieval towns, their descendants continue these traditions, quietly preserving Italy's soul with every stitch, chisel, and flame. The mothers and grandmothers, keepers of memory. No journey through the voices of Italy would be complete without honoring its matriarchs, the nanas and mamas who have long been the pillars of family and community life. In times of war, they waited at windows, kneading dough while listening for news. In times of peace, they fed entire neighborhoods with pots of ragu and trays of baked pasta. They raised children on lullabies and proverbs, passing down not just recipes but resilience. Their voices are woven into lullabies like Ninna Nana, whispered through rosary prayers, and called out from balconies as children play below. In kitchens fragrant with basil and garlic, their stories simmer with the sauce, rich with memory, flavored with love. To be Italian, many say, is to carry a piece of your nana in your heart, no matter how far you roam. Songs of migration, the diaspora speaks. For millions of Italians, the homeland became a memory, not because they wished to leave it, but because they had to. From the late 19th century through the early 20th, waves of Italians, especially from the south, boarded ships bound for America, Argentina, Australia, and beyond. They left behind villages and vineyards, carrying only hope, family photos, and perhaps a slice of cheese wrapped in cloth. In distant lands, they built communities, little Italies, buzzing with espresso bars, accordion music, and stories spoken in the old tongue. They faced hardship, discrimination, and the ache of homesickness, but they endured. Today, the Italian diaspora is vast, with over 80 million people worldwide claiming Italian ancestry. Though oceans apart, they still sing the songs of their grandparents, roll gnocchi by hand, and light candles to saints with names echoing from the hills of Calabria or the alleys of Palermo. In their stories, Italy lives on, like a song remembered from childhood. Voices of change, women, workers, and dreamers. As the 20th century unfolded, new voices rose, sometimes softly, sometimes defiantly. Women stepped into factories during wartime, then fought for the vote and equal rights in the decades that followed. Farmers unionized, students protested, and workers organized. In the streets of Turin, Bologna, and Rome, the people demanded a more just and inclusive Italy. These were the voices of resilience, of transformation, of a people unafraid to question power, to rise after hardship, to reach for something better. Even now, modern Italians carry on this legacy, in art and activism, in science and sport, in every act of quiet resistance and loud celebration. A whispering chorus. Italy's story is not just etched in marble or sung in opera. It's whispered in the breeze over wheat fields, hummed by gondoliers on misty canals, shouted across market stalls, and carried in the laughter of children on cobbled streets. It is told in the clink of glasses at a family meal, the solemn hush of a village church, and the echoes of footsteps along ancient stone paths. The people of Italy, in all their diversity, complexity, and warmth, are not background figures in a grand narrative. They are the narrative, the poets and the bakers, the freedom fighters and the farmers, the mothers who remember, and the children who dream. Their voices, layered across centuries, do not shout, they sing. And as you rest, dear listener, may their lullaby guide you gently to sleep. As we drift further into Italy's more recent past, we enter a landscape shaped by hope, hardship, and healing, a time of great changes, social shifts, and the quiet, determined struggle to build a better future. These modern struggles did not roar like ancient wars or resound in imperial decrees. Instead, they whispered their weight into the daily lives of ordinary people. In silent queues, factory whistles, empty dinner tables, and ballots dropped into boxes. Let's settle into the 20th and 21st centuries, where Italy's journey has been defined not only by challenge, but by resilience. And as we listen, may each moment ease you gently toward rest. From kingdom to republic, a nation reborn. When World War II finally ended in 1945, Italy was left battered and deeply divided. Its once proud monarchy was stained by its alliance with fascism. The Italian people, weary from years of dictatorship, bombings, and loss, faced a solemn choice. In 1946, they spoke, not with weapons or riots, but through a quiet, democratic act. In a national referendum, the majority voted to abolish the monarchy and establish a republic. King Umberto II was exiled. The royal age ended. Italy was reborn. But its new path would not be simple. The decades that followed were ones of reconstruction, of rubble cleared, homes rebuilt, and wounds, slowly, gently, stitched closed. The economic miracle, and its costs. During the 1950s and 60s, Italy experienced what came to be called the miracolo economico, the economic miracle. Factories in the north buzzed to life. Cars rolled off assembly lines in Turin, televisions flickered in living rooms that had once known only candles. Italy became one of the world's leading industrial powers, and for many, life finally felt full of possibility. But miracles often come with shadows. The boom created a stark divide between north and south. Southern towns emptied as people migrated toward Milan, Genoa, and Bologna in search of work. Traditional ways of life began to vanish. And in the crowded suburbs and smoky factories, a new kind of fatigue settled in, one not born of hunger, but of alienation. The Italian soul, shaped by slow rhythms and tight-knit communities, now had to keep pace with machines and city clocks. The years of lead, a nation on edge. By the late 1960s, discontent began to swell. Students, workers, and intellectuals took to the streets, demanding reform, equity, and dignity. The world was shifting, and Italy with it. But what began in protest soon spiraled into violence. From the 1970s to the early 1980s, Italy endured a period of political turmoil known as the Anni di Piombo, the Years of Lead, named for the bullets that echoed through city streets. Extremist groups on both the far left and far right carried out bombings, kidnappings, and assassinations. Fear spread. Democracy trembled. Trust in institutions faltered. Yet, Even then, life continued. People went to work, sipped espresso, played music, prayed, and held their families close. Through it all, the people's quiet defiance became its own kind of resistance. Mafia shadows and the fight for justice. In the South, especially in Sicily, Calabria, and Naples, another battle simmered. One fought not in battlefields, but in alleyways and courtrooms. The Mafia, with its web of corruption and control, had long plagued these regions. For decades, it infiltrated politics, businesses, and even law enforcement, operating in shadows and silence. But brave souls stood up. In the 1980s and 90s, judges like Giovanni Falcone and Paolo Borsellino led a courageous crackdown on organized crime. Their efforts brought major mafia leaders to justice, but at a terrible price. Both were assassinated. Their deaths shook the nation. And yet, in their memory, a new wave of anti-mafia sentiment took hold. Schools taught children to say no to corruption. Civilians formed community watch groups. The struggle continues, but with every whisper of truth, the silence of fear weakens. Corruption and the collapse of the old order. As the 1990s unfolded, Italy faced yet another reckoning, this time in the very halls of power. A sweeping investigation known as Mani Pulite, Clean Hands, uncovered vast corruption in Italy's political elite. Bribes, kickbacks, and shady dealings had stained nearly every major party. The scandal shattered the old political order. Long-standing parties dissolved. New ones rose in their place. Italians, once again, found themselves questioning who to trust and how to move forward. This wasn't a revolution of fire or steel, but of accountability. Of holding up a mirror and choosing, slowly, painfully, to change. Immigration and identity. By the early 2000s, Italy began facing a new kind of transformation, one that asked its people to expand the definition of what it meant to be Italian. As conflict and poverty displaced millions across Africa, the Middle East, and Eastern Europe, many sought refuge on Italy's shores. Some arrived by boat, others by foot or air, all seeking the same thing: peace, opportunity, safety. Italy, long a land of emigration, had now become a destination. This shift stirred debate. Questions of belonging, integration, and identity rose to the surface. Some feared change. Others opened their hearts and homes. In towns and cities, new voices joined the Italian chorus. Voices speaking Arabic, Albanian, Romanian, French, and more. They brought new foods, traditions, and dreams, and in doing so, added new threads to Italy's ever-evolving tapestry. Pandemic and resilience. In 2020, the COVID-19 pandemic swept across the globe. Italy was one of the first countries in Europe to be hit hard. Hospitals filled. Streets fell silent. Balconies became stages for opera singers, violinists, and neighbors singing in solidarity. Amid isolation and grief, the Italian spirit reached across balconies with candlelight, clapping, and care. Nurses wept. Priests offered comfort over cell phones. Families mourned. And yet, they endured. That same year, a rainbow flag appeared in windows with the words, "Andrà tutto bene." Everything will be okay. A lullaby for a frightened world. Ongoing struggles, enduring soul. Today, Italy continues to face challenges. from economic inequality and environmental concerns to political polarization and youth unemployment. Yet through it all, there remains a deep, steady pulse. The same pulse that beats in olive groves, in village bells, in family dinners and ancient songs. Italy's modern struggles are not signs of failure. They are signs of life, of a people still seeking, still dreaming, still finding their way. And in that quiet, persistent journey, there is hope. Close your eyes and imagine a land shaped by time, culture, and nature, where ruins whisper, vineyards roll over hills, and every breeze carries the scent of memory. Tonight, we travel across Italy, not in a rush, but in a gentle drift, exploring the land as it exists today. A place layered in history, alive with people, and quietly resilient in every season. This is not a tale of events or empires, but of living spaces, of cities, towns, and countrysides that still hum with life. Let's wander slowly now, from mountain to sea, from farm to piazza, and feel the rhythm of Italy, just as it is. A country of many Italies. Modern Italy is a country of extraordinary contrasts, not in conflict, but in harmony. To the north, snow-dusted Alps rise like ancient guardians, stretching across the borders of France, Switzerland, Austria, and Slovenia. Nestled among these peaks are regions like Trentino Alto Adige and Valle d'Aosta, where wooden chalets, the landscape, and German dialects mingle with Italian words. In the center, rolling hills cradle olive groves and vineyards. This is the heart of Tuscany and Umbria, regions of medieval towns, quiet abbeys, and a softness that seems to slow time. To the south, the land grows warmer, more rugged. The countryside of Calabria and Basilicata clings to cliffs and hillsides, and the volcanic slopes of Mount Etna and Mount Vesuvius still breathe beneath Sicilian skies. Italy today is not one land, but many, a patchwork of accents, flavors, traditions, and landscapes. A mosaic that moves together, even as each piece retains its own charm. Cities that breathe stories. Italy's cities remain living museums, not frozen in time, but lovingly inhabited. In Rome, the Colosseum still stands, not just as a relic, but a neighbor to apartments, cafes, and motorbikes zipping through narrow lanes. The Vatican hums quietly, hosting pilgrims and wanderers beneath Michelangelo's dome. Florence glows with golden light at dusk, its Arno River mirroring bridges and churches in perfect stillness. Painters still study in studios where the Renaissance once bloomed. Venice, fragile and floating, glides through time like a dream. Gondolas whisper through canals, and the echo of Vivaldi still lingers in the air. The city faces rising tides, and yet she endures, not out of stubbornness, but of love. Milan, sleek and stylish, balances tradition with innovation. Fashion houses stand beside centuries-old cathedrals. Technology meets craftsmanship. The past and present sip espresso together. In each city, cobblestones meet sneakers. Frescoes watch smartphones. And somehow, nothing feels out of place. Rural roots and quiet villages. Beyond the cities, Italy's countryside remains the soul of the land. In remote villages, grandmothers, nanas, still roll pasta by hand. Chickens roam under fig trees. Bread bakes in wood-fired ovens. Life follows the sun, the harvest, the church bells. Tiny hilltop towns like Civita di Bagnaregio seem to float above the clouds, linked to the modern world by only a footbridge. In regions like La Marche and Abruzzo, shepherds guide flocks as their ancestors did, and families pass down land and stories as heirlooms. The rhythm here is slow and sacred. Even as younger generations leave for the cities, many return, drawn by the deep pull of heritage, by the quiet power of belonging. The coastlines embrace. Italy's coasts wrap around the country like an embrace, warm, wild, and endlessly varied. On the Amalfi Coast, pastel villages cling to cliffs above turquoise waters. Bougainvillea spills over stone walls. Lemon groves scent the air. In Cinque Terre, trails weave between colorful houses and the sea. Fishermen mend nets beside tourists snapping photos. The waves lap gently, as they always have. To the south, Puglia's coast offers whitewashed towns and hidden beaches. In Sicily, the scent of sea salt and citrus wafts through markets. And on the island of Sardinia, rugged coves give way to crystalline waters and ancient nuragic stones. Italy's coastline is not just for postcards, it is for picnics, prayers, proposals, and long walks after dinner. It is part of daily life, as ordinary as it is extraordinary. Cultural life, still blooming. Modern Italy is alive with art, music, and festivity. While it honors its past, it continues to create, in studios, stages, and small-town festivals. New artists reinterpret old themes. Filmmakers tell stories rooted in community. Fashion designers blend tradition with futurism. From opera to hip-hop, from marble to cinema, Italy breathes culture like air. Every town has its sagra, a local food festival celebrating chestnuts, truffles, anchovies, or artichokes. Fireworks light up village skies. Dancers swirl in piazzas. Laughter floats between church towers. Even in quiet corners, creativity persists. Painters in Venice, potters in Derjuta, glassmakers in Murano, their hands shaping history into the present. Modern challenges, local strength. Italy today faces its share of challenges. Young people often leave small towns in search of opportunity. Aging populations require care and support. Earthquakes rattle certain regions. Climate change threatens coastlines and crops. And yet, Italians continue, with resilience rooted in community. Families remain close. Food is still a daily ritual. The land, despite hardships, remains generous. In many ways, Italy's strength lies not in its grandeur, but in its attention to the small and meaningful. A shared meal, a restored chapel, a garden tended by generations. The future may be uncertain, but the Italian response is steady: to gather, to create, to endure. Though it carries more UNESCO World Heritage Sites than any other country in the world, over 50, these places are not locked behind glass. They are lived in, laughed in, prayed in, sung to. In Assisi, monks chant as they always have. In Naples, street performers mimic pulcinella with modern flair. In Bologna, students debate just as they did in the 11th century, only now with laptops. Let your breath slow, and let your mind drift gently forward, not into the past, but into the quiet dreams of what lies ahead. As the final stars blink into view over Italy's ancient skies, we listen not for echoes, but for whispers of tomorrow. Tonight, we do not chase predictions or headlines. We simply imagine, softly, slowly, the hopes held in Italy's heart. What might this land become? What will it preserve? And what might it rediscover? Let's lie back beneath the olive trees of tomorrow and listen. A future rooted in heritage. In Italy, the past is never far away. But rather than cling to it, many are finding ways to carry it forward, not as a burden, but as a guide. Architects blend Renaissance proportions with eco-friendly designs. Craftspeople teach new generations to sculpt marble and forge iron, adding solar panels beside stone chimneys. Across the country, a quiet movement blooms, to preserve without freezing, to grow without forgetting. In rural towns once abandoned, young Italians are returning. They renovate family homes. They reopen bakeries. They plant vineyards not just for profit, but for purpose. These acts, small, patient, hopeful, are signs of rebirth. It is not a rush forward, but a return to rhythm. Regenerating the land. Italy's natural beauty has long inspired poets, painters, and pilgrims. But today, many Italians recognize that this beauty must be cared for, not simply admired. In the Apennines, reforestation efforts take root. Farmers experiment with drought-resistant crops. Vineyards explore biodynamic practices. In Venice, engineers and citizens work together to balance tradition with the urgent need for climate resilience. Across the southern coasts, fishermen are protecting marine life by reducing plastic and overfishing. In national parks, wolves and bears, once hunted, are returning to quiet forests. These are not grand revolutions, but gentle corrections. Steps toward healing, toward balance. Innovation, the Italian way. Italy has always been a nation of inventors, from Galileo's telescope to Leonardo's flying machines. Today, young minds in Milan, Turin, and Bologna carry on that spirit in new forms. Startups focus on green technology, circular economies, and sustainable fashion. Universities host labs where robotics meet ethics, and where engineers design not just for efficiency, but for elegance. In Rome, electric vehicles buzz quietly past aqueducts. In Sicily, solar fields stretch beside olive groves. And in Florence, researchers restore ancient art using nanotech and microscopic tools, marrying science with soul. Italy's future may not be the fastest, but it may be one of the most thoughtful. A culture of connection. As the world grows more digital, many Italians are leaning into something deeper. Connection. Not just Wi-Fi, but human warmth. Not just networks, but neighborhoods. The piazza, always the heart of Italian life, still beats strong. Even as apps and screens fill modern hours, people gather, for coffee, for festivals, for shared meals under string lights. The value of conversation, of presence, of being together, these are not lost arts. They are Italy's quiet rebellion against loneliness. And perhaps, its gift to the future. Education that honors wisdom. In schools and universities, there is a new awareness that education must not only teach skills, but also values. Programs now blend science with philosophy, agriculture with sustainability, fashion with ethics. Students explore not just how to make things, but why they matter. Elders are invited to speak in classrooms. Old trades are being taught alongside coding. In some places, kindergartens are held outdoors, in gardens, among bees and basil. Italy's hopes for its youth are not in pushing them harder, but in rooting them deeper. A European heart, a global soul. Italy remains a proud part of the European Union, a voice in collective decisions on peace, climate, and migration. But it also reaches outward, hosting millions of travelers each year, and welcoming new residents from across the globe. These arrivals bring fresh languages, new recipes, different songs, and in return, find a country both timeless and changing. Though debates arise, as they do everywhere, Italy's history of blending cultures may guide its way forward. From Greeks to Arabs, Normans to Austrians, every group has left a mark. The Italy of tomorrow will likely continue this dance of influence, hopefully with compassion and curiosity. Preserving the soul of the small. In an age of megacities and global chains, Italy holds tightly to the small and special. The corner baker. The family-run trattoria. The tiny chapel on a hill. There is hope in these places, not as relics, but as reminders, that life need not be loud to be meaningful. That joy can rise from simplicity. That slow is not behind, but ahead. Communities across the country are organizing to protect these spaces, not with slogans, but with presence. They eat local. They walk to the market. They know their neighbors' names. In doing so, they are quietly designing a future that is personal, grounded, and deeply human. The eternal flame. And so we reach the quietest part of the journey. Italy's hopes for tomorrow are not flashy. They are steady and sincere. They rise not from governments alone, but from balconies, backyards, basilicas, and bakeries. They flicker in lanterns at village festivals, in lullabies sung under tiled roofs, in the hands of a sculptor shaping clay just as their ancestors once did. The flame is eternal, not because it never changes, but because it keeps being passed on. Gently, lovingly. As you drift now into sleep, know that the Italy of tomorrow is already taking shape. In kindness, in curiosity, in care. It does not chase the future. It walks toward it, slowly, gracefully, like a gondola in calm waters. Buonanotte, and thank you for traveling with us.